Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So, hello everybody, good morning. I'm really happy to present again my work. I don't know, like a couple of people saw already some projects that I will show today again. To give you a quick overview, like where I come from, what my background is. Before I actually studied product design, I was in office administration in one of the biggest furniture houses in Europe. And my job was dealing with the whole data of the customers. And so I had to listen to all the problems what they have with products, their needs. And also because I gave loans, I had all the private informations about their occupation, how they live, who they are, their age. And that kind of like made me more curious and I decided that I actually want to work with that data and make something out of it instead of like just categorizing it. And that's why I started studying product design at the Bauhaus University in Germany. So my background is quite classical from that aspect from the beginning on, but the reason why I really made product was really that I was interested in the human behavior. So really looking into why people are dealing with things how they do, and to look at the mass kind of like what is in our life, and to look then how we can embed that in our everyday life and how do we interact with it, and also considering like the next step of the product. So every product is embedded in a whole system. So I started looking really more in the social structures and the system of products in the context of it. That, for example, is a product about like a new concept for dishwashers. And the kitchen is a fairly interesting place because it's one of the most social places in the house. It's what a lot of interaction is happening and what evolved quite a lot from the past to today. I can show a quick video. The dishwasher concept actually in that case is really like considering, as I mentioned before, from the first step, like you have the plates in the cupboard, you have to put them on the table, you have to put them after they get dirty into the dishwasher, and then from the dishwasher back into the cupboard. And even if the kitchen is a very social room, the dishwasher was still like this white, unpersonal object, but was smart and very practical, but still not really embedded in the context of a kitchen. So what I tried to do was here really considering how people interact with everything. So from the moment on, like that, actually the dishwasher starts at the cupboard itself, and these tablets are not that the plates are really from categorized. So you don't have like plates, your glasses, and your cutlery. You really, in the end, the tablets are already structured based on your everyday life. So you mostly eat the same things for breakfast. You mostly eat or need kind of like the same things for cutlery and dishes for dinner and for lunch. So kind of like you can choose which tablet you have, and at the table you can more socially involve the dishwasher, that you kind of like just everybody dumps the dirty dishes inside, you go to the sink, and in that research was also that in the end all the dirty dishes, even if you have a dishwasher, get collected at the sink. And then after a while you actually wash it. So there it's more like you directly have a smaller dishwasher plate, put it into the sink, close it like industrial dishwasher, and it gets cleaned. That it's more a fluent flow how the kitchen actually works. And through that I got more interested in the interaction with our objects, but also with other people. So at this project, I was kind of like curious, like how in creative studios people work, and it's not like that you have anymore like mostly one table where you sit every day and work. It's often that you change the position, that you have to share projects. So my background is not computer science, and also at that moment I was not aware that there was quite a lot of concepts long time ago about digital desks. But in that project, it's fairly simple that it projects your digital desktop on your desktop. But the point was also not like creating like a perfect complex interaction that you really project your whole computer on. It was more like just the overlap of digital and physical and the opportunity to share it with your surroundings, with your colleagues. So that this lamp was also adaptable if you actually work on a table or if you actually want to present it to more people, that you can use your wall, so the surrounding. And through that, I kind of like it evolved more and more that I actually got curious about interacting with our environment, so using the environment, looking closer what is possible to bring from the environment into our interactions. And here I choose an object what is really one of the human's first tools, and it's the stick. And it's an object what really evolved from the beginning of human civilization and adapted to our culture, to our tradition, to our jobs, and to our needs. What I think is fairly interesting if you have one object where you can compare the different actions in a social aspect. So I was playing a lot around like how different opportunities open up different aspects of interacting with the environment. Sorry. And we're also looking into how we kind of like get more involved with less distraction. So at that time, there was no selfie stick out. I think now it looks more ridiculous than when I did that in 2009. But it was also the thing like how can the technology not lead what we are doing? What if it's really more like a silent helper and leads us through engaging more with the environment, and also giving maybe the chance to bring interaction more outside and having like a window with two other people, two other lives, and also inviting them to your outdoor and indoor little universe. And they were like quite old project what I was doing, but why I wanted to show you that before is because they kind of like build on the three pillars that I'm really interested in, and it's like the social structures and the human behavior, what I think every project is for me the base on. I'm very interested in the interaction with the environment, and especially like bringing our interaction, inviting the environment much more in all our products, and contextualized function. I think it's really important to understand the context and then based on that understand which functions we actually need. So I think it's not always the best to make very complex multifunctional tools. I think sometimes it's really better to focus on the special needs, on a special function, and to understand the context of it. And I think that communication is a very important aspect in every project that I made too. The next 3-4 projects I want to talk a little bit more, go a little bit more in detail. My final thesis at the Bauhaus already built on that, and I was fairly interested in education. Because I think that education at the moment is not really up to date. There's this big gap between what is happening in school and what is happening in the everyday life, in the private life of the children. And I think it's really important to bridge that gap. Furthermore, it was also fairly interesting to see that there was also still the gap between how a computer gets used or new tools get used, and all these different alternative education systems. So what I did was I actually made a 4-month research with children and different schools in 2 different countries between 6 and 16 years and created workshops with them to really observe the whole complexity of education and school to understand the bigger picture. So on the work with the children's side, I created a workshop that was based on like 5 steps. They, in the first week, the children got like a little homework where it was about like observing their everyday life and observing school. And the goal was kind of like that they should bring every aspect that they see in the life what they kind of like would think that it would be important to bring it into the education system or into school. So the big picture on the left actually is what was the output. That's like just a little cutout what the children brought. I was quite impressed how engaged all the children were. And what I did also in these workshops was that I was more like the silent watcher, and if there was a question or the need, then I was there. But it was all about like not influencing the children. I really wanted to have like a real output there. So on the next step, it was about that the children really discuss what they brought, to see where the overlaps, to kind of see where there's more need to develop it, to then brainstorm about what they could do, what could they change, till prototyping, and in the end presenting into the whole school to discuss that product, that idea, and why it is important for them. To the topic also, does it work? Yeah. Came out 3 books about it. That is the book what is about the field studies. One book is about really the theoretical research about school education, how it involved. And then there's a whole book about the field studies, the research that I made through the whole process. I'm sorry. Exactly. And what was fairly interesting is like, I think it's a little bit too small to say, and it's also in German, is that the children really didn't understand why mobile phones are not allowed in schools. They already kind of mostly gave up on the computers in school because they mostly didn't work. Either the software was not updated, either the hardware had a problem, or they were not accessible when they needed it because the school were too afraid that they get broken because the children are free to use it. So the children always like had their hidden mobile phone underneath the table where they already used it as their computer. And like through looking closer into that, what the children actually use in the computers for in school, the mobile phone was fairly enough. It was a lot about research, internet research. It was a lot about like presenting and sharing. And it was quite a lot about like the social network and just very focused applications like language software or just a calculator. So in the end, I developed with the schools, with psychologists and also some teachers, a fairly simple thing that it's kind of like brings the mobile phone on the table in school to make it more accessible. And there's also a short movie about it, but it maybe shows. So in the end, the idea was that to make it more useful, the phone is, you just have to extend the screen, that it, if you have to read your textbooks, if there are texts, you kind of have to scale it up a little bit. On the other side, what I think was a really nice opportunity with the mobile phone is, as I mentioned, I think it's really important to bridge the gap between outside and inside, and also the gap between the different classes and disciplines. And because it is always like in the pocket, it's quite accessible, and children are already always making pictures, everything what interests them. It's fairly easy to kind of like create connect it. There was also the concept of a software where it's kind of like a little bit optimized to the everyday school. And what it, additional to that, because it was still like product design, what I studied was like optimized like from the product aspects, that it's very long lasting, that it's like hard to break, and as I mentioned before, that often the computer gets like old, or the software gets old. The electronic display in the end is not something what you have to update. the mobile phone is already the hardware and what updates it all the time. A more new project what I was looking into is about information in context. Yeah.
The mobile phone one, what platform was that designed for?
Sorry?
What platform was it on? Was it iPhone or?
No, it was Android. It was a Samsung phone.
And it worked on cheap ones?
So the idea was that it's with NFC that it's the electronic ink display. It needs like fairly not a lot of electronic energy. So in the end, it's not about that you really flip through like home pages a lot. It's really more like if you have like something where you have to scale up your information, you then kind of like project it on your e-ink display. Yeah, sorry.
Social media and Instagram and all the stuff that kids do.
Excuse me?
Do you just allow them to carry on with their normal
yes.
mobile phone behaviors?
So the idea was like that I think, and that is actually an aspect also of the project what will come up. I mean, we had a lot of human behaviors like how you actually should behave, that you, for example, don't call at 10 in the evening, or when you're sitting at a dinner, you shouldn't call. So I think we shouldn't delete completely the opportunity of this. I think we should also learn the children that they have to understand when it's appropriate to do something or not. But in the software, it was the idea that it kind of like also blocks at least some things that you focus more on the context of school. I think it is important to have access to the social medias because it's a lot about sharing. It's about like creating like also like pages where you could create like contextualized projects. And I think also the phone, what I think is a great opportunity that there's the chance for the children to write their own apps in the end, to optimize their ways and to learn also how to do that, to create their own products in the end.
A quick, boring practical question. I just wondered how does this work? I mean, how does the phone connect to this platform? I mean, how does it?
So in the end, it was the idea that there is an online platform where in the end, you know, that the school or every class has kind of like a little bit like Google Drive, their shared platform, where you have access to it with a fairly simple software what is like optimized to some functions of like and some things that I mentioned about the calculator and things like that. And there's the opportunity with NFC, so like my phone had NFC already embedded, that you kind of really just in the end like send it to the electronic display. And there's also the opportunity because
so does the electronic display have its own power and Wi-Fi or something, or is it?
No, it would be really that. No, it would be more that. I mean, it has to have a tiny bit of it, but the idea is really to minimize it as much as possible, actually. Yeah.
Display is coming from the phone.
Yeah.
Is the phone talking directly to the display, or does the phone talk to the service and the service drive the display? Yeah.
So the display comes from the phone. So in the end, it will just project directly what you say on your phone at the moment. But like the whole data and the bigger data and the whole files will happening on the platform. Any other questions? A recent project that I'm working in is more looking into information in context. In the end, school is also about like information and communication in context, but here we were looking more about like the structures and how evolved our communication, and also of the parameter of time and space. So information in time and space, and filtering information via context. What we did here was like that we made a lot of interviews with people, and we actually started with surveys, but we figured out that the output was fairly generic, and that we were actually curious especially about the little details of communication. Why are people really sending messages? What is it? What triggers that the moment when you send a message, and what is the content? So we had fairly like private and interesting outputs and consideration, and a big topic was also that like time and space is really a problem, especially many people that you're communicating with, they are not at the same city, not even often at the same country, not even at the same continent. So just like the time zone is a difference, but also even if you're at the same space, our busy everyday life kind of like often stops us from really communicating with people. And also what many people mentioned was that even if you have all these friends in Facebook or in all your social networks and all these people that you communicate with, there are still like these few ones that you actually have a close relationship with. That is either your family, your really close friends, or your partners. And most people kind of like wanted to make a tiny bit of a difference to make those people really feel that it's meaningful what they are sending. And on the other side, it was a lot about the reason what people were sending. So like this whole like all the time dripping information, like these little messages that you send like on Facebook, on Skype, they were all kind of like triggered by memories that, or the environment, something what a person saw what reminded him on the other person. So you send like a little message to the other person. And in the beginning we were looking how could we make like memory more tangible, but in the end we figured out that memory is intangible, but it is it gets triggered and is sensory in the end. So it either reminds you, like either something visual reminds you, or a smell reminds you, music reminds you on something. So as an output of the project, what we created was a tangible voice-based hardware and software that kind of like feels also less than a product. As I mentioned before, I kind of like see and think it's important that we not always have something in front of our face all the time, and that we get more involved in our environment and something what feels more like something that we own it. So we kind of like choose the icon of a worry stone, what is more something where you kind of like hold on in your arms and just carry it around with you. And as I mentioned with tangible, I meant that it's actually just embedded in the pattern itself to make it feel more tangible. So the shape in the end kind of like leads you and let you know how you turn the object. So I'll maybe show first some interactions of it. I'm sorry, 2 screens are too much. So in the end, the idea was also not like, even if it's in the end kind of like it reminds kind of a lot about a mouse, but it's about like really using the whole environment, not having a flat surface to interact. And even if you have a surface, that there's more a tangible feedback. So if you would turn it around on a surface just through the patterns on the material itself, it kind of like gives you a feedback. What you're doing, and to lead you a little bit more. And that is actually not directly related to the software, but the software kind of like knows the direction where you go. So it's kind of like more like having a feedback in general. On the other side, we saw that information in context, as I mentioned, also doesn't mean that it has to be like a linear information. Often you are like in a specific context, and in this specific context, specific people matter, places, and also like how you get there and where you are and which time frame you have. So you have like these small universes even during the day that you have. So like your work in the end is a different context than at home, and even like meeting different friend circles is kind of like a different context also to you. So we were looking into how could we like kind of like give a look on a glance of your life and a quick information about what is really matters for you at the moment. So that kind of like shows just like a visualization of how something like that could look like in a 24-hour really fast running through thing. So kind of like every dot shows either a person that is from interest, a place from interest, or like an appointment that will come up, and you can also zoom in and it shows you how you get to the next point. And as closer a white circle gets around you, kind of like this small universe will end soon because another universe actually gets from interest for you. So for example, you get out of work.
I'm confused how
Yeah.
that relates to what you just showed.
You mean the tangible one? I will show that in now. So
Is everybody carrying one of these?
yeah. So the idea is like we were looking into if there would be an alternative to a mobile phone, how could it look like? If we want to interpret communication different, we wanted to test around with that. And the reason why I showed before the tangible interface is like even if it's voice-based, and we don't want that there's always a screen in front of you, the idea is we are spending so much time in front of screens. They're actually already enough. And if there is extra information that you need, if you want your life on a glance because you need this additional information, you kind of like can type into the screens. You can piggyback in the end on the environment. So the idea was like either where it's more easy that you just use your private screens, your private laptop that's around you, but the idea would be also to kind of like get the screens outdoor involved into that. And the other reason where we kind of like saw it, as I mentioned, that the memory is more tangible and sensory, we were also looking into, I mean the screens surround us, but also places that remind us surround us, and all, and also messages that where we kind of like want to leave something in the environment. So what we created was also kind of like the idea of sending not only messages, sending in the end things. And the idea was then to, through like involving companies into the system, we actually get an easier access to these screens in the environment. So.
Is it like a pager? Do you get notifications on it, or do you feel other people?
Sorry?
Is it a haptic device? Is it
in the end, it's almost like a mobile phone without a screen. What is voice-based and tangible, but in the end, like how it works would be different, so that you kind of like leave messages in the environment, or can send things in the environment, or like things to other people, and how things would be displayed on a screen would be also different. So it would interpret information different than how a mobile phone at the moment interprets our information. So that would be an example. Like the idea was also to not only send things not only send messages in environment. The idea was also that what if we kind of like have like really this sensory exploration of messages. In the end, we were like really looking into, okay, how can we recreate smell? How can we recreate memory? But in the end, it was really the best way was like actually really sending the thing what reminded you. So the idea really was like collaborating with shops, collaborating with cafes, collaborating with like places of interest, and then giving the opportunity to in the end leave an object for you where there's a notification if the person is close to it, and in the end you get handed not a message, you get handed a thing.
I think you need to explain in a little more detail what's going on in the video.
Oh, sorry, yeah. So in the end, here, yeah. So here would be the case that, let's say this person is at home and reminded that good friend Julie actually has his birthday. They are not at the same city, or they're not even close, or they don't have the opportunity to directly meet up. So she knows, because when I said that I'm actually talking about close friends. So you kind of like know the preferences, you know the places where they go, you know a little bit about the routine. So what she did in the end was like sending through the pings and things an object to Julio. So the next time when he passed by the specific shop, he gets a notification either that there's something left for him, or when he's inside, he gets a notification that there's a present for him. The other one was more in a social context, when in the end many people mentioned that they just sometimes would love to drink a beer with the person who is far away, or just to leave a little thing to kind of like make them happy, like a little present. And many people actually mentioned that they send each other like really presents. But this is still like out of context in a way. It's like it arrives at home, and often in a situation where you kind of like don't appreciate enough. So the idea was like really embedded into the context. When you're in a bar, you're already in a mood to drink a beer. So you kind of like receive it at the right moment and appreciate more, and kind of like giving the other person a window to the other person's life. That makes sense.
It's assuming that you have the familiarity with your friends' routines and what they're doing.
So that's, I'm sorry, I think I explained it not enough. So that's why we made in the research and in all these interviews, if there was really this big difference between how much you actually knew about these many people and how much you actually knew about these few people that you really related about. So if you think about your family, you know your preferences of your family. You probably even know like where they buy their food, or like the little things that they buy sometimes for themselves to treat themselves. So it's really based on more these people that are close to you, and not for everybody. And just to show the last video, and we also tried to do that with messages in the environment. So like if you kind of like have a memory about the moment where you had a good time, but is unrelated to anything commercial, any product, so it's not like that you were actually at a cafe or anything, that you can leave it in the environment. But the thing is that was what will lead me now to where I'm actually ended up like doing in the last few months is, it's still like not really satisfying. There's still like so many technical restrictions, and it doesn't really work. There's still not like this seamless embedded information in the environment that you want, that like this seamless communication that it really feels as we would wish that it is. So you still have to have infrastructure. So either you speak in, or you either have to all the time your phone words about GPS, and it's not precise enough, it doesn't come at the same right moment, or something is not working. So what I'm fairly excited about and interested is about looking closer into the environment. So not only interacting with the environment, involving the environment, really working with the environment. So during my time at the MIT Media Lab, I got the chance to work with cells and programming cells. So what we did here is like also, in the end, the product is highly contextual. We created a second skin, what is a textile, what is a cloth. A sport cloth was the first application that we were thinking on. And these bacteria actually react to heat and humidity. So in the end, we created a biological interface what reacts to you as a human being with the needs that you have. So when you get hot and when you start sweating, it adapts to it. And to make that more clear, because it's fairly abstract, I will show the video. So the whole project was really from the beginning of the explorations of the cells to how we would fabricate it in the future. And what it is in the end is really just like bacteria that you can find in your food. So I don't know if anybody knows natto, the Japanese food. These are the cells out of this food. And what these cells do, they connect to each other and they contract and expand to heat and to humidity. So we started creating a kind of like coating and also biofilms to like engineer different structures to see where we could make usage out of it. That is a video real time, and it's actually around this size, to create like really bioactuators and biosensors. And to see how complex we get for what we can use it, and also to say which different application it has and also different substrates. So here, for example, it is on a flexible material instead of a rigid one, so it really creates like three-dimensional pandas and it disappears. And what we started creating, how we can control it also not only a completely natural environment like the skin, or like here, for example, as the tea bag. We were also looking into kind of like combining biology with computation. But here you see how it actually reacts to the skin when you're hot. That is also real time. And what we also looked into in the end, here you really have to consider that the computational part in the end has to happen before you create the product. So we made a heat and a sweat map of the human body and then planned the material based on this data to create like the first prototypes of suits, but also looked into how we can combine it with electronic devices like lamps, or it's fairly long, the video. Animated origami. So when you think about that, actually so many toys have still like so many electronics inside. How can you actually create interactive toys with no electronics or with less electronics? So we created some different opportunities, but also we started looking into artificial nature. So I think everybody knows the mimosa plant. So we're trying to recreate it based on electronics and this bacteria that they respond to you and to your finger. And to not getting stuck completely in the conceptual part of it, and to really look further on how we can do it. We were also looking into how would that look in the future as a fabrication process. So in the end, we just like hacked the printer and also used a CNC mill for using it in a really precise way and in a big scale to create really functional products and applications out of it, like the picture that I showed before. It stopped. I'm sorry. Like this picture. So this was the first one where we really printed the bacteria on it. In the background, in the end, is a structure that fakes the heat and the sweat map. So we projected the heat and the sweat map on it, and based on what you choose, which area at the moment is more hot, based on different sports, it opened and closed the little flaps by itself. And based on that work, I started working now, and I got really interested in how can we really create like new products through understanding nature and the environment. So what I'm doing at the moment, I'm looking into electro signals into plants, because they are still like the most precise sensors that we have, and they are fairly sophisticated. And in the end, what a plant is, it's just like an electrochemical signal with a fairly interesting hydraulic system, how that creates movement, reacts to different environmental factors. Same like we do. We react to many different environmental factors and we want to adapt to it, same like the plants. So I'm looking into how we can use and really create seamless embedded sensoric devices, sensors and bioactivators, and translate that. So the idea, and for my final thesis, is actually to deconstruct how a plant works and to deconstruct and extract only the sensory part to create a biological interface that is based on like different applications. So one application would be a fairly real world problem into agriculture, but I also want to look into how could we go more further with that and really maybe having the chance in the future to use it maybe even as a communication device. Yes?
Can you talk a little bit more why you think a plant sensory system is better than an electronic one?
Yeah. I mean, that is a topic where it's kind of like sensible. There are many people who think it's that plant actually not able to do that, but the studies are going more and more really that they are now the proof of concept that they are sensing it. So in the end, the plants really have also electrochemical signals. That's how they communicate with each other and also communicate in itself with each other. So like if you think about the tip of a plant and the root of it, they communicate all the time. So in the end, a plant has like also almost like a magnetometer inside, where it's kind of like searching for the right place where to hold on, where the gravity is, and is sending the signals backwards and forwards. But it also reacts actually to environmental factors, like the obvious ones that we know is like sun, wind, pollution, but they actually also react to magnetic fields, and they react to devices that we created. So there are some I'm still like in the moment. That is a quite recent one, but there are a couple of outputs already, and I also met with a couple of scientists that they are proving that also at the moment, where in the end they can measure the signals of electronic devices. So one example is that they made testings where there was nothing else in the room than a Peltier plate, and a Peltier plate has actually a rhythm of 4 minutes. So it always changes a tiny bit the frequency every 4 minutes, and a plant can sense exactly this 4-minute rhythm. What is fairly interesting if you would really try to kind of like search further on to figure out what are the signals that the plants can sense, but also what are the signals that the plant sends to us back. So what is the electro signal, because it also has a different frequency, and how could we work with that? Does that make sense? Okay. Any other questions? Yeah.
So how do you get from that understanding to developing some sort of user application or something that?
So what for my thesis, there's fairly not enough time to get to that point. It will take a couple of years. But what I'm doing at the moment is I'm creating a couple of devices that it can sense the electro signals, and I will focus on a few factors to have at least like a proof of concept of some of those. And then I will more on the biological side. I'm working with microfluidics, and there are quite a lot of proteins that also react to electro signals. So I will still have a computer in between where it in the end translates the signals of the plant, and then will send it to the digital microfluidic device what has like proteins that will react and create a specific function or like a display that I want. But I'm also like a lot in contact with biologists to see then if there's opportunity to delete the computer in between when we arrive at the point that we really understood what is the input and the output.
So what's the bigger picture here? That we grow devices in the future, or we evolve them, or what's the?
The bigger picture is we are trying to, and we go more and more in this direction of really sensing everything, tracking everything, and there is like already like this really natural opportunity of sensing and tracking everything in a very even more sensible way, and also to getting the opportunity of like building an interface between and our environment. And I'm not talking about like replicating a computer made out of plants. I'm more talking about there's a lot of information that we want from the environment, but it's more like binary interfaces, or where it's more about a state or indicator that you're looking at. That's what I'm fairly interested in.
I'm still not getting it. So is this about helping scientists understand what's happening in the environment through capturing different kinds of data?
No, I see it more really as making everybody understand what is happening in the environment. And if we going more into like the real-time applications, I mean, we are looking into an app what the weather is. We are looking into an app what the weather will be. We are looking into apps about like so many environmental factors. And nature is, I think there's the opportunity to kind of like go away from all these electronic devices and really embed it more in the environment and read out of it. And they fairly know earlier what is happening also. So there's also a different time span that we are talking about.
Well, the reason I'm confused is that the project before this, you used bacteria to create a new kind of human-centric applications of the bodysuit by harnessing the properties of things that occur naturally. But here you're not saying that. Here you're saying that you want to capture the things that occur naturally in order to help people understand what's happening in the environment. And that's quite different, isn't it? So you're not going in that direction with this project then?
I think the reason why I'm explaining it like I can't at the moment. So there's a difference between what I will do in the next couple of months, where it's fairly like deconstructed in the end, brought into what we more see now around us. And sure, the vision would be that it's going back into the natural environment and back into something what already has the information embedded. So I'm fairly interested in embedded information.
Is an example, for example, using a tree to tell you what the environmental conditions in a particular location are like? Is it that kind of thing? Like
it could be. I still don't kind of like why I'm not using it. I still don't kind of like the picture because it kind of like looks cheesy in my head, or I think it's really just like the first picture. I think if we end up really looking more in this direction, also that picture should and will evolve. So it will be in the end. I don't see it really as a tree standing and then like there's something plopping up and screaming at you. I think it will be more complex actually in the end, and at the same time more simple.
Is one of the problems that, and the examples you're thinking about now, you're thinking of biology and plant life being like a machine. But what about other kinds of hybrids? Why should we mechanize nature to be more like machines? Why don't we sort of rethink what machines might be?
Okay, it seems like it came then wrong through. It's like the vision is actually the other way around. So that's what I meant with like now first kind of like we have to destruct it and like translate it into computers that we understand it, because that's the language that we are using at the moment, and that we are fairly not very much skilled anymore to understand what is happening in nature. But the vision is actually then just like through this understanding and through working with it and through learning from it, that it actually goes through the process that we understood it, that we change how we think about like electronics and computation, and then kind of like get the curve to go back to more natural computation and natural systems.
Okay.
Thank you.
Oh, you done?
I'm done.
We've got probably about 2 or 3 minutes for more questions because we have to turn the room over. But are there any more questions at all?
Yes.
Okay.
So I was looking at your prototype. So both the phone and the ePad thing with the phone on it.
Yes.
And clearly, I guess they are meant to be concepts because
Yes.
those things don't fully work like all the way. There's
Exactly.
some technical restriction that's stopping you from kind of fully implementing it.
Definitely.
How do you feel these technical restrictions kind of shape your work? Like, do you feel like they kind of are restrictions and you try to ignore them so that you can kind of imagine the future, or do you try to, or do you feel that it's more important to kind of understand what these are and to design around them?
So the first one that you mentioned, what was I think the phone one, right? I mean, that was where I was completely far away from any involvement of electronics. So like my course was really about like concepts and research and product design. So there it was obviously really conceptual. The phone with the e-ink display. Yeah, I mean, I had always the luck to work or to be involved in interdisciplinary teams or in a surrounding. So what I always asked and questioned if it at least would be possible and if there are opportunities to go in the direction. It's not that I'm planning into completely in the blue. The last one that I showed is really recent. So there's I mean, we're looking step for step for it. So the first one, how we interact with it, the pattern is actually working. So there is really a physical object what works, and where I'm really looking into how does it feel, how would it really work. I mean, it's not highly sophisticated yet, but I think obviously my background is not technical, but I think it is very important to at least understand it, to question it, and to see if there's also then the opportunity to realize it. Yeah.
Anything else? Great. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.